Golden Black Live, Brian Newbert joins us. It's just a time to sit and chat and talk about Purdue sports here at the Triple X. And we want to thank Carrie and Greg Ehresman for their hospitality and their root beer. We're very appreciative of that. And of course, our other sponsors, John Basham, the folks at Basham Reynolds, State Farm agent Trent Johnson, and Hilton Garden Inn, and the crack crew from WLFI also, with Jamie and Jerry and Gordon and all the help that they've given us here on site. Brian, we'll talk football first, and obviously you've been watching this program for a long time. We haven't seen it lower, and yet tomorrow's another opportunity, but it was disappointing 2 weeks ago against Cincinnati.
Right. First off, you promised infinite wisdom from me earlier.
Yeah.
There will be wisdom. It will not be infinite.
Yeah, there you go. There's a limit.
Yeah. Obviously, a very disappointing result for Purdue 2 weeks ago against Cincinnati. That was a game a lot of us felt like they had to have if they're going to make anything redeemable about this season. You have me on here to talk about recruiting. I think, this is obviously becoming, and this is not anything new, a little bit of a referendum on, Purdue's talent level, which has become an indictment of, the recruiting. That's the recruiting results from the last couple of years. I always say recruiting rankings, they don't matter in the moment all that much, but they matter when they're given worth. And I think what you've seen from Purdue the last couple of years is the recruiting rankings, which haven't been very favorable, have been given worth because, the results have reflected, and even more so, the recruiting rankings.
Yeah, I know Brian articulated that well in a column that was as part of the Golden Black Express yesterday. In fact, I was at Ken Burns last night at the Elliott Hall, and I had 3 people come up and say, boy, Brian's column was dead on, but talking about the fact that there is a correlation here, and it simply has to get better, whether it's Daryl Hazel being the head football coach or whatever happens down the road. You just can't, you got to get to a level. Joe Tiller recruited enough talent to win.
Was it Ken Burns who said that?
No, Ken did not say it. We got one ringing endorsement.
I've heard he's a fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Purdue obviously has had to figure something out in recruiting. They have good players on this team right now.
Yeah.
They do not nearly have enough of them. Depth is a consideration, and I think defense is always a good reflection of a team's talent level, because oftentimes teams take their best athletes, they go to offense, and what's left over plays defense. When you see what Purdue historically has been on defense, outside from some outliers, when you see what Indiana's been, I think the two are comparable from a talent level perspective historically. Maybe Purdue's a little bit better on average. It's really hard to field good defenses at a high level because if you can't recruit a lot of really good players, a lot of really good athletes. What you saw Joe Tiller do, Joe Tiller was a great recruiter. He was a great evaluator. He had great recruiters on his staff. We shouldn't compare people to him because he was very, very good at what he did. But they had the mentality, oftentimes, your best athletes went to defense because your system on offense could make up the difference. And I think what you saw Joe Tiller and Brock Spack build in 2003 when they were #1 in the country in run defense, I believe, which is unbelievable at Purdue, an extraordinary accomplishment. I think that had a lot to do with that. Purdue had a system defensively back then where they wanted to complement their high-powered offense with big play defense, and Purdue hasn't really had a defensive identity, lately. They haven't been very physical. They've been terrible against the run, and you have to be able to stop the run before you can do anything on defense. Just like we say about Purdue's program in general, I say, Purdue's not going to do anything as a program until they get quarterback figured out. Well, Purdue's not going to do anything defensively until they can get better against the run, until they can just be fundamentally sound, until they can just get a dude with a football on the ground reliably. You saw that against Cincinnati when the quarterback runs over 3 guys at the 3-yard line and gets across the goal line. That stuff is an indictment of your talent level, your physicality. The two go hand in hand, and Purdue just hasn't been able in recruiting to get enough players, to be competitive, to be more competitive than they have been, and that's obviously an indictment of recruiting.
Daryl Hazel has 13 commitments, I believe the number is, maybe number 14 coming. We don't know that for certain by any stretch, but what's got to be his mindset, because he's trying to survive here at Purdue without question. And yet he was on the road last week and trying to convince guys to get there. They've had in relative terms, a pretty good reception in terms of talent level of guys that are committed.
Right.
We've talked at length about the challenge to keep them committed.
Yeah. Purdue's getting the guys it's been able to get on occasion here the last couple of years right now among their 13 early commitments. That's not been the problem.
Yeah.
The problem is getting them signed. At this time a year ago, they had 2 very good offensive linemen committed. They had a number of other players who were were good recruits for Purdue. They were good recruits for a lot of people, but especially for Purdue, considering where it is right now. It's getting them actually on campus that's been the problem. You know, Purdue's lost 15 commitments over 3 recruiting classes, which is just an unbelievable number. About as unbelievable as Purdue leading the country in run defense, as we just mentioned. That's a lot of coming and going among your recruiting classes, and that continuity has affected Purdue, because when you have a guy committed for 6 months and you lose him in January or in December, whenever else, then you've lost Plan A, Plan B's gone, Plan C is probably gone. You go down to Plan D and F, and suddenly you're going kind of combing the country for whoever you can get at that point. And you've seen Purdue recruit some guys who haven't got a lot of interest from other people, and that's not the end-all be-all of a recruit's worth, but it says something, you know. And
no question.
Purdue, you're always going to have quote-unquote diamonds in the rough in your recruiting classes at a place like Purdue, but you can't have whole recruiting classes of them. And Purdue's had a lot of those guys, and you have to have an unbelievable batting average with that level of player. You know, Joe Tiller, and we got to stop comparing people to Joe Tiller, but he always had 3 or 4 of those guys in his recruiting classes, but his batting average was pretty good with them. If you're signing a class with 15 of those guys, you have to hit on 10 to 12 of them, and that's just not happening.
And speaking of which, in basketball, we've been hitting that subject and certainly been on the website on a regular basis in terms of trying to get that first commit to men's basketball. It's been a little bit of a challenge for Matt Painter and company. Talked about his systematic approach to this, and the fact that the board is bigger than the guys that haven't and have chosen to go elsewhere on the early end of this. Where do you see it right now?
Well, Purdue's got another big weekend coming up. They've got 3 big men on campus. Some of their other guys who are still remaining in play, who they've been recruiting for a very long period of time, or visiting elsewhere. The end game is near on those guys. We'll get a clearer picture as to how big Purdue's board needs to be here in a couple weeks, if not the next couple days. But you know, Purdue still has a pretty robust group of guys they like that they're recruiting. Obviously, you want to get a couple of those guys, but you also still have time. If you don't get some of these guys right here, it becomes reason to worry. But you also still have the spring and whatnot. But you know, Purdue's lost a number of guys who they recruited for a very long period of time, who are really good players, who you would have liked to have had, but you've lost them to good people. And there's no shame. I know it's a zero-sum game in terms of you either get them or you don't. But there's really no shame in losing guys, you know, to Michigan State, to Louisville, you know, whoever else. You're not going to have a great percentage when you recruit against people like that. It's this tier here with these guys remaining, where Purdue really needs to get a couple of these guys, and then they need to do a good job in the spring, presumably, because they're very likely to have scholarship space remaining in the spring too. But you know, people ask me, is it time to panic? Well, it's maybe time to worry, but panic is a pretty strong word.
Yeah, absolutely on that front. And it's one thing we know is that Matt Painter has been on the road and trying to get this handled as much as and his staff obviously as well. You look forward now in the next few weeks. Men's basketball will be heating up. You've got a very good nucleus, a team that can be in the top dozen this year in your view.
Right, and you've built this team and the team before it, and some of the better teams before, without getting those really high-profile kids we just talked about Purdue not getting. So even if you don't get some of these real A-list guys, quote-unquote, that doesn't mean you can't put together good teams and can't keep winning games.
Yep.
This team, this 2014 class has been very good, probably better than people expected right away. But right now you have a pretty short window because Caleb Swanigan is, you know, he's not long for this university, as we well know. In fact, he's probably got a couple more months left here. Vince Edwards and Isaac Haas are guys who are probably going to be here their senior years, if I had to guess, but you've only got 2 more years of them. You've got a good nucleus right now. You kind of have a little bit of a silver bullet where you have a good team. Right now, you need to do something with it. Last year, Purdue had an opportunity to do something in the NCAA tournament. Didn't do it. Before that, they had a great nucleus with, you know, the Robbie Humley, Twan Moore, Juwan Johnson class. Outside of their control, that opportunity went by the wayside because Robbie Hummel gets hurt twice. I know people want to stop hearing about that, but that is reality. You know, that team really could have done something. Those 2 teams really could have done something. That got taken away from them. Right now, Purdue's got an opportunity because they have 3 potential pros on their team and a good nucleus around them. A very good player, maybe coming up as a freshman in Carson Edwards. You should get better guard play. You have an opportunity to do something here. whether it's regular season success, whether it's postseason success, you have to do something notable this year, if you ask me.
That will be a key thing as we watch this season unfold, and it's going to get hot and heavy early with Villanova coming in Game 2, and the Boilermakers will have a very challenging schedule. I want to bring Greg Ehresman in here just to tell him and the staff at XXX thank you for everything, and we really do appreciate the hospitality and
Thank you, Greg.
so much with that standpoint. Let's do it, DX. I mean, you brought Ashley Burkhart, and you brought your first female food item. Who might be next?
We don't know. I mean, this is not something that we kind of go out and recruit for, so to speak. We always the situation's always pretty much evolved without our influence, which has really worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
You know, Ashley was in when she got signed up and was just, talking to us, and she's got a great personality. It was just like, what gives? Why don't you have a female athlete? So we got to talking a little bit, and we thought, well, I think your personality and what you're doing, it would match up perfectly. So we got that developed and going on. We have discussed doing more, and we've also discussed going kind of if not a round robin, but an annual, to where we can involve more people and have more products out there for athletes to be signed up for, and to kind of broaden the sports. With her and David Badaya both, we kind of got away from just strictly football only, and which has worked out really well. All those products are doing very good for us, and they're just fantastic people in and of themselves.
Not to divulge client privileges, but you have a big guy in the basketball team that shows up.
I was just going to say that.
Is that true? That big guy from Alabama shows up now and then?
Yeah, yes he does, and he enjoys our breakfast, and he's just one of the most personable.
He's not
young men.
endorsing the product.
No, there's nothing going on there.
Yeah.
But we just have a great time with him, and he's a fantastic individual. And the personality is what we like about him, and his family is wonderful. So we have a great time with them, and he likes our pancakes. What can I say?
Perhaps someday down the line, if he has the last 2 years you hope he has, maybe you can work with something where the burger is like 3 times the size of all the other burgers.
It may have to be the size of pancakes.
Yeah, 'cause he's a pancake guy. I gotta say. Well, we're appreciative of the long-term relationship. We have a lot of fun doing in the magazine our traditions that are so much a part of XXX, but also of Gold and Black as well, and Purdue Sports. And it's a privilege to be able to work with Carrie and with her better half, Greg, the Ehresman family here at XXX. I want to thank a lot of people for today's event. Obviously, the folks at XXX, our sponsors, Hilton Garden Inn, and of course John Basham and the folks at Basham Rental. We thank Brian Newbert. I want to thank President Mitch Daniels, Stacey Clarity, and Kyle Charters, and of course Jerry Vohar and Jamie Long, and a new proud papa with a 3-month-old, I think it is about now. And Gordon's still on the phone over there trying to make sure this is all working well. But we appreciate all the efforts to make this happen today. We will see you next week. 2 o'clock start time in our studios, unless Greg wants us back next week. But we'll have Dave Shondell will join us, and in 2 weeks we hope to have Matt Painter at Mackey Arena for October the 7th as well. So a lot of fun still to be had. We'll look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks on Gold and Black Live.